You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Tropical Storm Elsa continues to keep forecasters guessing as to just how strong it might become by the time it reaches the coast of Florida. As for right now, it's reached the coast of Cuba, has made an official landfall, now moving inland on that strip of land, it will pass just east of Havana, just west of Cienfuegos, and then up towards the Florida Keys, Key West, and then towards the western part of the Florida Peninsula in the next 24 to 36 hours at most. The storm right now from the National Hurricane Center has winds of 60 miles per hour. That's sustained, according to them, with an estimated central pressure of 1007 millibars. Our analysts are going slightly lower with a pressure of 1006. The storm, obviously tropical storm warnings for significant parts of Florida, we'll talk about that shortly, and a storm surge watch also in effect because storm surge levels could reach, I think it was 2 to 4 feet in some areas along the western coast of Florida. That of course will also be discussed. The rainfall effect as well in parts of southwestern and western Florida could reach between the 5 to 8 inch range. So, to talk about it tonight, my name's Nathan Foy here in the studio, and they are over there, our Discord team. Tonight we have Xavier, Kenneth, Noah, and Wyatt. Good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
And good evening here.
So, on my right, you can see the visible imagery of Tropical Storm Elsa, how it's been progressing this afternoon. It's looking interesting, fairly decent actually. It had a big blow up earlier in the day. I'll begin with Kenneth because you're one of our analysts and you would have had a lot to say in the decision making on our latest fix. What's the current progress of Elsa?
Elsa has since yesterday it's been decelerating, and the whole pressure gradient just blown up. Recon also didn't do a very well sampling, especially with the strongest northeastern quadrant, which throughout the day it has never been sampled. So we can only just, what we do is to use the central pressure from drop zone and try our best to derive the intensity based on the pressure gradient, like around 10 millibars, 11 millibars, which is equivalent to 60 miles per hour.
It's had
As of now,
sorry.
The wind shear is still low to moderate right now, around 10 to 15 knots. Southwesterly, earlier the shear is makes the center to be exposed and with pretty disorganized convection blobs. But right as of now, with frictional convergence of it as it approaches Cuba, and as it takes the route that the terrain in Cuba is pretty flat.
Yeah.
The impact to Elsa should be minimal. As it traversing Cuba, and as of now, you can see a pretty good curved band.
Yep.
Wrapped around the center. The LCC pretty much isn't that exposed right now. Earlier is you can clearly see it in visible imagery, and as of now, it's been whopping around pretty well. Yeah.
So that puts it in good stead for intensification after it emerges off the coast of Cuba now?
Intensification, I'll say it will somewhat hold the current intensity still before moving further north, and more or less I think it will maintain its intensity. Although it is said that like the entrance region of the jet stream will help Elsa for further intensification, but the western side isn't really the best to Elsa, which currently pretty much it's right now still bringing some uh, like 10 to 15 knots shear to Elsa, which makes it more or less right now it is maintain its intensity,
Right.
which also like makes it struggle to intensify, which we can see is a bit more in the vorticity map. Let me share my screen first.
Before we go to that,
And here
Kenneth,
it is.
we'll pick it up in a moment, but I just want to go over to Ethan right now, who's showing us some radar.
Sure.
I don't know if he's ready for us actually, or whether he was going to speak. We'll show that in a moment. Kenneth, go ahead then with the vorticity there you were looking at.
Yep. So in the vorticity map, let's go back to a bit earlier ago, where you can that is at 3Z today, which you can see the vorticity is still a bit elongated, and to the west at the lower level 925 millibars. But as we go further upward, you can see there's somewhat earlier is a tilting from west at the low level to east at mid levels, which you can see especially it's been tilted in 500 millibars, which for vortex tilting, this unfavored intensification, because this is a tilted vortex is not effective for a pressure drop at the center, because the vortex is just tilted, which it isn't very effective for vertical deepening. But as of now, as we go back to right now, which is 18 UTC, although 500 millibar still looks very lopsided to the east, which is suggests the main convection right now is also lopsided to the eastward.
Yes.
But as of now, you can see it's being more circular, and throughout the lower level, between 700 to 925 millibars, it's becoming more stacked. Although the overall vorticity isn't that impressive, like at the range of only 100, which in general we may see vorticity should be like one, one, 150 plus, which that would be more ideal. But vorticity is always the higher the better. So the vorticity is actually slightly improved, but the current shear is still hindering a bit, that will block it from significant intensification. And that's why I'll expect it to more or less maintain the intensity, which I'll say it won't go at most 65-ish.
Okay.
As the forecast track all the way until the landfall over Florida.
Ethan was showing us radar, and I know he's off mic. I received that word at the last minute there. Just showing what's going on over there in Florida right now. There's already some looks like significant thunderstorms occurring over parts of the southeastern part, towards Miami-Dade and Broward counties, and then towards the northwest there as well, towards Naples, east of there, and possibly heading towards Cape Coral eventually. Some interesting weather that's associated with the storm, and that's passing through already right now. Just to reveal the latest information from the National Hurricane Center, they will be updating at the end of the hour. We like to come on at about an hour before their big updates so that we can run the news when it comes out. But as of the last update, which was at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, that's when it made landfall in the southern coast of Cuba. 60 miles per hour, 1007 millibars. The watches and warnings right now, for those who need a little catch up: tropical storm warning in effect for the Cuban provinces of Ciego de Avila, Sancti Spiritus, Cienfuegos, Matanzas, Villa Clara, Mayabec, Havana, and Artemisa. The Florida Keys from Craig Key westward to the Dry Tortugas, and west coast of Florida from Flamingo northward to Suwannee River. A storm surge watch for the west coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Oclocody River, and a tropical storm watch for the Florida Keys from east of Craig Key to Ocean Reef, Florida Bay, and north of the Suwannee River to Indian Pass, Florida. So you can see them marked out on the National Hurricane Center forecast map here. This will update in an hour, or a little bit less than that now. You may also notice that in comparison to previous advisories for quite some time, they had hurricane watches and or warnings. They're all gone now. So clearly they're not anticipating a hurricane in all likelihood at this point. So that's maybe a little bit of good news, but I think well, they were never really forecasting a hurricane, apart from when it was actually a hurricane in its earlier life. Let's talk to Xavier. You're with us here as well. What are you showing us?
So I have U.S.-related graphics for those in Florida that are watching us in preparation of Elsa's arrival, and this is mainly looking at what we're expected to see in terms of rainfall and flooding. This is the Weather Prediction Center's excessive rainfall outlook. This basically highlights the risk of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles of a point. And you can see in Florida where we have parts of the region in slight risk, especially this region where I'm highlighting with my mouse here. If you look at the key, that gives them a 10 to 20% chance of flash floodings within 25 miles of a point. So you really got rainfall that could contribute, and that also includes the Keys there, as highlighted by the fact that that line there goes south of the Keys. You also got areas of central and northern Florida which are still under a marginal risk. So of course, anywhere there in the Florida Keys and the Gulf Coast should be monitoring there for that excessive rainfall. Now, tomorrow is where things get a little bit more interesting. We see a large portion of Florida under that slight risk for excessive rainfall. That is also going to be interesting to see. There might be a little isolated moderate risk that gets issued. It depends on where that rain sets in terms of its outer banding. And of course, moderate would correspond 20 to 50%. So the risk really gets more dire once you get into that moderate risk. So that might be something that the Weather Prediction Center does consider adding onto tomorrow's outlook as we get closer and more models come into agreement with the consensus. And then as we head into Wednesday, it starts to shift as Elsa continues northeastward. We start to see northeastern Florida, southeastern Georgia, South Carolina, and then even extreme far southern North Carolina in that slight risk for excessive rainfall. And then, of course, the marginal risk still continues for central Florida and then goes even more inland into parts of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina as well. So that's something to really look out for in the coming days. In terms of actual rainfall, I'm going to be showing a few series of models. Now, of course, the Weather Prediction Center does include their own rainfall forecast as well. That's what they intend to use in terms of their own forecast. You can see really towards the coast areas near Tampa, that's where they're depicting the worst of the rainfall, around 4, maybe 5 inches of rain, of course, locally more in spots, but then overall you see this really wide swath of rain where you get towards those pinkish colors in the center here. We're looking at 3 to 4 inches, those reddish burgundy colors all the way going into Georgia, the coastal areas of South Carolina and North Carolina. That's at least 2 inches of rain. Elsewhere, once you get into eastern Florida, you're really looking around 1 to 2, locally more in spots. And then, of course, Alabama, Georgia, even more inland into South Carolina and North Carolina, you're still looking at 1 to 2 inches. And it does not take that much for flash flooding to occur. So really take that with a grain of salt. Make sure you have flood safety plans ready in place. If you are under a flash flood warning, make sure to get into higher ground immediately. Do not drive in flooded roads.
So so that was directly from the Weather Prediction Center, was it?
Yes.
All right.
Now, so once you get into the GFS is a little bit more aggressive in terms of rainfall. You have much more areas that are looking to see 4 to 8 inches as depicted by the more yellow colors here. I can see really south of Tampa is where you start getting those much more absurd rain amounts of up to 8 inches of rain possible. So that's definitely going to be something to look at for. 8 inches is definitely not a small amount at all. So that's really something that those there need to be monitoring that if this were to verify. You also got some more 4 to 8 inch pockets in northern Florida as well as even Georgia. So really, Florida and Georgia looks to be the areas that will be receiving the most rain, regardless of what track this takes. But regardless, we're looking at a really wide swath of Florida that will be seeing at the very least 2 to 3 inches of rain. So it is interesting to see that the Weather Prediction Center has been going conservative as they typically do, but that's why I said that they will probably be going for that moderate risk in terms of excessive rainfall. But really, you're talking about areas up to 8.5 inches of rain. So that's really not something to joke about. In terms of the European model, they have the worst of the rain a little bit offshore. You still have a little area here that still gets at least 4 inches of rain. And then you see that all the rain that they have is in southern Georgia. That's where they have the worst of the rain. You see a little area of 9 inches of rain, 9.36. So that is not something to mess around with. I'd say anywhere within this little area that I'm highlighting right now really needs to be monitoring the rainfall forecast. Anything that their local National Weather Service office does provide, because this is definitely not something to take lightly. And then, of course, you still have those 2 to 3 inch rainfall amounts as you go into South Carolina and even North Carolina. And this is just in the next 5 days, of course. By the end of the 5-day period, the National Hurricane Center does have this back out in the Western Atlantic. In terms of the GDPS, that's also another thing that targets Western Florida as well as parts of Southern Georgia. I can see a little bit of an interesting part in southwestern Florida there. 11 inches of rain. Key West getting over 11 inches of rain in spots as well. So that's really something to look at for Key West, southwestern Florida, even parts of southern Georgia. It's really depending on where the center makes landfall. Unfortunately, what we're looking at is the fact that because of the wind shear that will be affecting all the convection, all the rainfall is going to be pushed towards the east of the system, and that's why we're looking at far more rain affecting the eastern quadrant of the storm than what you would see on the western quadrant. So that's really something that we really got to be looking for. Although what is interesting to note about the GDPS is that they do take this more western inland. So instead of the coastal Carolinas seeing 1 to 2 or possibly more in spots, you see more inland areas, central South Carolina and central North Carolina receiving the rainfall rather than the Carolina. So it's definitely an evolving forecast. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of rainfall. But I would say in terms of a general idea of what to expect, anywhere here in southwestern or western central Florida in general should be monitoring the latest for 4 to 8 inches, locally more, possibly up to a foot in spots. If you're in southeastern Georgia, South Carolina from central or eastern, be on the lookout for 2 to 3, locally more in spots. And if you're in North Carolina, also the same story, up to 2 to 3 inches of rain expected.
Now Xavier, on that model as well, trying to catch you there as you're going on to the next one. Does that have, so you talk about it going inland later on, but also, is it going a lot more inland in Florida there on the west coast?
Yeah, they have it. Yeah, most of the rainfall from the other models, you see it pretty much going from here. It's just a slight bit east, but it's not as east as the inland as what you're expecting. It's really as you get to days 3 and 4 where it starts to really push more inland than all the other models. Let's see what it takes, because of course the Mid-Atlantic might be something. So I'm trying to see where it has it exiting off of. So it looks like they have it going much more inland into Virginia, giving them 3 to 4 inches of rain, and then pretty much pushing off Maryland, and then finally, and then even bringing even more rain across parts of New England. So they're taking a far more western track than the really consensus. So I wouldn't put all my weight, but it would be something to watch as we head forward into this storm's life, because I know there's still a few models that do take that little more inland route. But of course, if that were to take the more inland route, then there would be less chances of it, re-strengthening into a tropical storm. Because at this point around here, National Hurricane Center does have this weakening down to a depression briefly before it does re-strengthen to a tropical storm before becoming extratropical off of New England. So that's something to watch with that. But in terms of looking at the severe threat, we know that you were talking about the fact that there were severe storms brewing with this. Going off the day 1 outlook, there is a marginal risk for severe weather across central and southern Florida that does include the Keys. This is particularly for the 2% tornado threat that does exist. That is more towards the southern parts of Florida there, Key West, as well as the Miami area. In terms of wind threat, you're looking at a 5% risk of seeing damaging winds, although that does not include the tropical storm force winds that you're going to be seeing. This is just from those isolated storms that would become severe from the outer banding. So do not take this
Right.
as a 5% chance of seeing tropical storm winds. There's a much higher chance of seeing that. And then hail risk that is not likely to be seen.
Yep.
So there is, so that is the case with that.
Day
Tomorrow,
2 is going to
however,
be more interesting. Yeah.
tomorrow is going to be more interesting as we're now looking at a slight risk for severe weather. That is, for example, some cities: Tampa, St. Petersburg. You definitely aren't in this. Let me get the cities up here. Orlando, Melbourne, as well as Fort Myers. You guys are looking at a 15% risk of severe weather tomorrow. Miami is in that marginal, and so is Jacksonville. Going in that specifically, that is where the tornado threat goes up slightly. You have a 5% tornado threat. For Orlando, Melbourne, Tampa, Fort Myers area, and then of course 2% regardless still for Miami and Jacksonville. When you get into the wind threat doesn't look to be there, but regardless, do not take that as there's not going to be any damaging wind threat. You're still going to be having a tropical storm plowing through the region, so you're still going to be seeing tropical storm force winds, and I'm sure Nathan will be talking about the wind probabilities soon enough. And then of course you also have the wind probabilities at the bottom of your screen anyhow.
Yeah, they
and
are.
and of course, the hail risk, there doesn't look to be much. So we're looking at a tornado threat as well as the tropical storm force winds that we will be seeing with this. And then as this weekend's into a depression, there really isn't much one. It's just general thunderstorms. So it's really looking to be today and tomorrow that we're looking to see the severe weather, tomorrow especially.
All right, thank you very much for that. That went on for some time, but it was very important information. Now let's take a look. Wyatt, shall we take a look at what you're showing us right now? And welcome, by the way.
Yes, I have right now. I'm gonna show some of the wind forecast things. This map here, this is the official National Weather Service forecast for the potential for sustained winds. Areas in yellow here, there's a potential for wind of 39 to 57 miles per hour. Now this goes out for the next 2 or 3 days. There's nothing here beyond that. That could change later on as it draws closer to that area. But basically, if you're in any of these yellow areas, again, potential for 39 to 57 mile-an-hour winds, and you could have some damage to porches, awnings, carports, sheds, and unanchored mobile homes, and lightweight objects blown around, tree limbs broken off, and then a few roads impassable from debris, hazardous conditions on bridges and other roadways. If you're in the orange areas, which is closer to the coastline of Florida, you have the potential for strong tropical storm force winds of 58 to 73 miles per hour. And you could have some more significant damage than if you are in the yellow areas here. So something I want to take a look at here. This is the official National Weather Service forecast for the wind gust value. Generally, the wind gusts are higher than the sustained wind, but the time is down here at the bottom of this little graphic. Today at 11 p.m. Eastern time, you're going to start having some strong wind gusts beginning to arrive at Key West. Anything in red is over tropical storm force on the gust value, and the system will just continue lifting northward, mostly brushing the coast. Many coastal areas will see wind gusts of over 40 to maybe 50 miles per hour, especially in the deepest red. And this will just continue going up the coast, bringing tropical storm force gusts to cities like Tampa, and then eventually Ocola, and then before landfalling in the Florida Big Bend region before weakening. Something else I'd also like to look at, this is the storm surge threat.
Yes.
Much smaller here. This is an important one as well. There are storm surge watches in effect again for portions of the Florida coast. I believe that's going to be for the areas that are in orange here, where there's a potential for between 3 to 6 feet of storm surge. 3 to 6 feet of storm surge, that's absolutely nothing to take lightly. Areas of inundation with storm surge flooding will be accentuated by the waves, with damage to several buildings, mainly along the coast. And then sections of nearshore escape routes and secondary routes become weakened or washed out, especially in vulnerable low spots. Major beach erosion, strong rip currents, and then moderate damage to marinas, docks, boardwalks, and piers. and small craft will be broken away from moorings, especially unprotected anchorages. And the areas in yellow, you could have between 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. This goes up from Key West, Florida, all the way to about Apalachicola, and then including a little bit of the area here from about Cape Canaveral to the north of Jacksonville, Florida. And we already talked about the flooding rain threat. There's a moderate flooding rain threat here, and then the potential for several tornadoes here in orange.
So that's the latest with regards more impacts on the coast of Florida over the next 2 to 3 days. The National Hurricane Center will be updating soon with the latest information on the storm. Now let's take a look at the latest satellite imagery, a few more satellite views. There's the water vapor imagery right now. That makes it a little bit easier to figure out where around the center is. And you can see I'm not fully familiar with Cuban geography, believe it or not, so I'll just try and figure out where exactly that is, where the center of the storm is. That is in the province of Matanzas, which I think had the hurricane warning earlier, which was dropped to a tropical storm warning, and then up into Mayabec, I think it is, and then onto just east of Havana. It looks like the storm will pass maybe 100 miles, 50 to 100 miles east of Havana. And then that, of course, means that there's not very far to go to the Florida Keys after that, and you can already see the coast of Florida towards the top of the image there. Let's get another imagery format. This is the unenhanced, the shortwave, and you can see a little bit more clearing in there, but it looks to me as though, and you would expect it, that it's probably weakening just a little bit right now. And finally, this is the rapid scan, infrared. Looking rather interesting right now. The western side, you were talking about, Kenneth, you were talking about it being lopsided earlier. To be honest, it looks very lopsided now.
Yes, but to be honest, that already being less lopsided. Before it was very lopsided, and the blobs are pretty disorganized. Doesn't look like more circulation landing in shape. You can see a permanent shear line appeared on the western side, which this reflected that the 10 to 15 knot shear from the west to southwest side right now is already pretty much better. You can see a pretty clear curved band exists, which already is a sign that it is a bit better than it is before. And as I mentioned before, there's a vortex tilting, which pretty much matches the current appearance as well.
Okay, well, interesting to watch at the very least. Some decent cloud tops occurring inside that as well, in the core and south of there, over the Caribbean Sea. We're going to take a short break here. We'll be back in just a moment, and then we'll have the latest from the National Hurricane Center in the next half hour, along with taking your questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in the chat. That's what we're here for more than anything, and that's what we'll be doing up next. Over the years, we've done updates and live coverage on literally hundreds of tropical cyclones, and in recent years, particularly in 2020, launching out in other regional channels, doing weather updates and coverages there as well. We also launched our Earthquakes channel in 2020 and are going forward on all fronts in 2021 with a community that's grown remarkably in the last year. But it's not just about you being along for the ride. We want you to enjoy yourself as well as an Ultimate fan, and that's why we've lined up a big chain of benefits for each various stages on our Ultimate Fan program. Force 13 Live. This is the latest on Tropical Storm Elsa, which is now moving overland over Cuba. My name's Nathan Foy for this second half hour of tonight's expected 3-hour broadcast, which we hope to be here for whilst we delve into the nitty-gritty regarding Tropical Storm Elsa. We've also got Noah here tonight, and we've not spoken to you just yet, so what are your thoughts on the storm this afternoon, this evening?
Yeah, well, when I looked at the storm earlier, I thought it will, and looking at the storm right now, I think it's pretty much your classic June, July type cyclone in this area with those early season cyclones in the Atlantic and the Western Atlantic usually have a big, broad influence with either lopsided vortex or exposed low-level center and a large band of convection and thunderstorms and the strongest winds on the eastern side, and that's essentially what the recon plane going into the storm found. The strongest winds around 45 to 50 knot wind barbs at 700 millibar are strongly displaced from the low-level center, all in this eastern band of thunderstorms. And west of the low-level center, there hasn't been a single flight level wind reading of over 30 knots. So that shows how lopsided the wind field in general is. And this vortex tilt is likely to continue as the cyclone progresses over Cuba. I think it's even likely that the low-level center gets fully exposed, as the HWRF has been showing in the most recent run. And together with those cyclones usually comes risk of localized flash flooding in those consistently over one place moving rain bands on the eastern side, and also the risk of tornadoes as we have surface friction with the surface, and that creates these horizontal tubes of air, just as in a usual supercell. With the thunderstorms comes a significant tornado risk, and I would say the tornado risk is actually the greatest regarding Elsa, because to me it looks like your pretty classic tropical cyclone tornado setup, and the SPC has already been issuing a 5% for tornadoes, and also the risk for localized flash flooding, as we are expecting rain up to 8 inches.
Well, here we are. I didn't think we'd be able to catch it, but it is actually on the Key West radar at this point, just about reaching the middle of the storm there. Of course, not in great clarity, given how far it is away from the radar, but it's getting closer, and that gives you a little idea of how close the storm is now getting from the Florida Keys.
I do want to point out that the radar beam scans. It doesn't scan flat; it scans up a little bit. So that means the further away from the radar you get, the higher up it's scanning. That's about 25,000 feet, I believe, when it's that far away from the radar. So that's getting into the mid-level circulation on radar. So that's not an exact area where the low-level circulation is, because today it has appeared that the two circulations have been decoupled a little bit.
Yeah, the low level would probably be, would you say, a little north and east of that? I'm not sure.
More west of it.
Northwest.
West.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nathan,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna have to break in. You know how I mentioned that there was likelihood that we would probably be seeing the Weather Prediction Center issue that moderate risk for excessive rainfall.
Oh, they have
They have done just that. There is now a moderate risk of excessive rainfall for tomorrow for a large portion of western Florida. This, of course, includes Tampa. Now, remember what I did say in earlier this stream? I said that this means that there's now a 20 to 50% chance of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles of a given location. So that is now something that it needs to be looked about. There is now a moderate risk of excessive rainfall for the western Florida coast. Of course, the Force 13 US will be covering that. Rainfall graphics will be made, of course, with this system.
All right, start your questions with Force 13 all in text. We'll start to take some of those now. Here's the first one. Has land interaction allowed for the storm to get better aligned?
No, I wouldn't say so. That's it. The land interaction is probably also going to tilt the vortex even more, as the HWRF is indicating. On the HWRF, the low-level center gets fully exposed with just a blob of convection to the east of it. That's about what I'm expecting. Usually, when you have such a tilted and unorganized vortex, the land interaction is really not the best for it. You might have some frictional convergence and therefore convection blowing up now, but this is not the convection that is going to sustain or make any pressure drops in the tropical cyclone.
All right, this is the latest visible imagery. Let's just see if we can just touch it up a little bit so that we could possibly make out more of where the center is. It looks to me as though it is right on the that little gulf there, which I'm not sure of the name, just along the coast. Quite clear to see where the center of the storm is near. There's more questions then. Is it a similar question? Is it possible that the land interaction with Cuba will tighten the vorticity?
Very unlikely, I'd say.
I would say there's still a chance because of the way that the system is, the lay of the land, and the way the system is moving. There is a possibility that the way the friction works could end up tightening it just a tad bit, but I don't think it would really cause any deepening of pressure or strengthening of wind. I would think it would just be a little more sustained.
And I was waiting for this question. What are your thoughts on Elsa becoming a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico again?
No, probably not.
Probably
it's very
not.
unlikely.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning for that then?
Shear. There's the low level. So far, Elsa, for the entire life of Elsa, it has been impacted by shear, and that shear mostly comes from the misalignment of the wind speed between the low levels and the mid and upper levels. So we have uniform winds out of the east, just minor directional differences, but the wind at the surface is much stronger than at 700 and 500 millibar, and especially the difference between about 3 kilometers, which would be 700 millibars, and 5 kilometers, which would be 500 millibars, is around double. So the wind speed at 700 millibars is around double the one at 500 millibars, and that really means all the lower level clouds and all the lower level stuff associated with the vortex is going practically in front of all the mid-level convection, and this shear has really been unfavorable for any intensification for Elsa, and this is expected to continue, where the upper level winds switch to westerly, basically making up again for the same kind of shear, and together with the land interaction of Cuba, this is really not expected to be super favorable for the tropical cyclone.
Okay.
Well, I hate to run over your parade here, but the ship's land interaction model, the decay ships, and LGEM all strengthen the storm in the Gulf of Mexico and suggest that it's going to get up to 60 knots. And if there's a model that says it's going to get up to 60 knots, then by no means can we count out hurricane intensity.
And that's the voice of Devon right there. Welcome aboard. Nice to have you on once again.
I'm happy to be
Well,
here.
Noah, did you
Yeah,
want
I
to
said
come back
it-
on that?
I said it was unlikely, but of course, it's still a possibility with every tropical cyclone entering the Gulf of Mexico that it actually reaches hurricane intensity. But I personally would say that it reaching hurricane intensity again is pretty unlikely.
I would like to say that although there is expected to be a significant amount of shear in the Gulf of Mexico, it does appear that the storm is going to be moving in such a way that it's actually aligned with the shear and it won't be affecting the system at all.
Okay.
At least from what I'm seeing here. It doesn't like I said, I've got shear going up to 20 knots for sure, and even higher up the East Coast. But when you go ahead and take a look at the adjusted shear for forward motion, it appears that the shear goes beneath 5 knots.
Wow.
Can someone actually get a area average sounding on the GFS or HW or F for the vortex? Because that would be pretty helpful to judge whether or to judge how high the shear actually is
In
for it
the
in the Gulf of Mexico.
in the
We'll
meantime,
have
just going to take a few more
doing that.
questions here. Is there a possibility that Elsa stalls or slows over Cuba or the Gulf?
No. There's the steering currents are not going to allow that. You've got a trough that's coming on the eastern United States that's going to give it some northeasterly motion, and then you have the edge of the high pressure system, which is also going to give it some northward motion. There's no way that the system could stall.
Yeah.
And will Elsa re-strengthen to a tropical storm after it leaves the United States? We've been looking at that in the forecast map from the National Hurricane Center. Where did it go? There, that one has that on the forecast. What will allow it to re-strengthen once it emerges off the east coast, if it does?
Basically, a jet interaction would allow it to re-strengthen.
It's going to begin extratropical transition.
Yeah, it
so
won't be tropically forced, to say the least.
Right, it'll be
there will be other things involved with the storm, an extratropical transition, some baroclinic forcing for sure. Yeah, this thing, and warm Gulf Stream waters certainly help too. So yeah, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't. Most storms actually do.
Okay, and another question there from Contact, who asked our first question of the night. Should the Atlantic go on a 2-week lull after Elsa dissipates? I think from our opinion perspective, that would be nice. But will it actually have a break? I'm not sure. What are our thoughts on the panel?
Yeah, I can say something about that. It's pretty likely that the Atlantic, at least the whole intertropical, the activity south in the Caribbean and the MDR is likely to shut down because we have the passage of a unfavorable or suppressed Kelvin wave, convectively coupled Kelvin wave. So there's suppressed convection. The MJO is also going to pass into the Pacific, which suppresses the Atlantic. And afterwards it's gonna come back into August. That's when we're gonna have to watch for new activity. But the next 2 weeks, the Atlantic is gonna be suppressed. We might still have to watch out for subtropical development because that is not as influenced by tropical forcing as all the wave action and gyres. But as for intertropical activity, it's likely to shut down. Yeah.
And this is just another visual depiction here of the forecast track from the last National Hurricane Center cone. There will be a new cone out shortly, along with their update, which is coming up soon. The watches and warnings might change as well, so be on the lookout for that. Although I doubt many of the areas that have warnings already, that their status will change at all. But that's an idea, a visualization there of the cone. And of course, not forgetting the storm surge watches that are currently in effect as well. We're waiting for that advisory. I don't really want to read out anything from their last advisory, considering it's just about to change, so we'll deliver that information when we get it. Could the loop current possibly strengthen Elsa after emerging into the Gulf? From what I saw, isn't there a cooler patch off the western coast of Florida right now?
Yeah, I think I saw that as well on the Coral Reef Watch. I might actually be able to get a map into the Discord chat. Wait a second.
And just another question there, do we think waters have gotten more favourable for hurricane strengthening over the past 20 years? Rather wider implication question there.
Well, it's pretty much proven that sea surface temperatures have been warming. So, yes, sea surface temperatures have gotten warmer, which would theoretically be more conductive for hurricane development. So, yes.
Nathan, I've sent a current sea surface temperature anomaly map into live output if you want to share that one
Yep,
for
there
the
it
loop
is.
current question. As you can see, Elsa is gonna have pretty much average to off the western coast of Florida, even below average SST. So, sea surface temperatures, I don't know. They are just around average, so nothing out of the ordinary.
Below average further north along Florida, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we know why that
I mean,
is?
I guess there had been cold fronts that had cooled the waters up there, but I don't really know. That's just a guess.
I've got to interrupt for the latest update. A storm surge warning has now been issued for the Florida West Coast from Bonita Beach northward to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. That's a storm surge warning. The tropical storm warning along the Florida West Coast has been extended northward and westward to the Oceania River. The tropical storm watch for the Florida Keys north of Craig Key and Florida Bay has been discontinued. The government of Cuba has discontinued the tropical storm warning for the Cuban provinces of Ciego de Avila and Sancti Spiritus. At current, the storm now has winds of 50 miles per hour, 45 knots, with a pressure of 1008 millibars at the latest advisory. And they are expecting a peak of 65 miles per hour before reaching the coast of Florida. And I think now that they are forecasting for the storm to be post-tropical as it emerges off the US East Coast. This will all be reflected on the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, which we'll show to you when they prepare it for us. But that's the latest information, that a storm surge warning, that's the most important part here, has now been issued for the Florida West Coast from Bonita Beach northward to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. I'll let the team discuss that for a few minutes whilst I change the bottom headings on the visuals here. So with the wind speed going down, the storm surge risk becoming more real with the warning.
Indeed. So, of course, it looks like a weekend a little bit more than the National Hurricane expected, considering the fact they did have it going back only down to 60 in the last forecast. But it looks like they're still keeping up with that 65-mile-an-hour peak, so it's still 15-mile-an-hour strength in this time rather than the 10 that he had predicted initially. So, really not much in terms of the forecast philosophy, although it looks like this will now be, of course, as you mentioned there, Nathan, that post-tropical by day 4. I'm waiting for that cone to come out, of course, just like I'm pretty sure a lot of people that are tracking the storm are. They usually update the cone as one of the last things they do. There will also be an update to those wind probabilities as well. Those also update. And the cone has just come out. They have actually shifted the track westward. It's in live discussion for you to. I'll post it in live output so you can see it. But they've actually shifted it slightly towards the west for the later parts of the period. Now having it
There it is, yeah.
Yeah, just off the coast of New England by day 4 and right into Newfoundland by day 5. So that is a interesting change to the forecast there.
So a storm surge warning now in effect. Just to reiterate that information once again, a storm surge warning means that there is a danger of life-threatening inundation from rising water moving inland from the coastline during the next 36 hours in the indicated locations. That was the west coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay.
So, has this thing finally emerged off the coast of Cuba, or is it still going over it?
It's still going over it.
Boo. When's
Yeah,
our
it looks
recon?
like-
I'm assuming 0Z.
It takes off at and then like about 10 minutes, I believe, and then it should be there by let's see, it takes off at 21Z, which is 10 minutes. It should be there between 23Z and 0530Z.
So 0Z will be about our first fix.
Yes. And looking at the latest forecast track, I'm looking at it like really up close right now. It looks like it has crossed that little bay that's that kind of goes into Cuba a little bit, and now it's on the other side. It looks like it'll be off the coast of Cuba tonight.
So I'm just going to read out the latest warning information as I'm typing it up here. The storm surge warning, as mentioned, I'll just say it one more time. West coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. Tropical storm warning for the Cuban provinces of Cienfuegos, Matanzas, Villa Clara, Mayabec, Havana, and Artemisa. The Florida Keys from Craig Key westward to the Dry Tortugas, and the west coast of Florida from Flamingo northward to Ochlockonee River. A storm surge watch is still in effect as well for west of the Oceania River to the Ochlockonee River, and a tropical storm watch for Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass, Florida.
Yep. So that's going to be definitely be interesting to watch. It looks like the entire western coast of Florida is now under that tropical storm warning, and then now reporting starting to get to parts of the Panhandle. Wyatt, I know you are in the path of this, Pensacola. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I'm not in the path of that. Pensacola is the westernmost city. It is
Right.
not too far from the Alabama-Florida border, although I have been watching this storm very closely for any changes, but at this point it looks like that the track guidance has zeroed in on the Big Bend region. Something, though, I do want to look at, I posted that in live discussion, it is the tropical storm force wind probability with the earliest arrival time of tropical storm force winds. So looking at that, it looks like Tampa right now has about a 50% chance of receiving tropical storm force winds, and those winds will be there at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, and they should reach the northern Florida coast by Tuesday at 8 p.m. There is an area of 40 to 50% chances of tropical storm force winds right now in the Big Bend region of Florida. And looking at Miami, Florida, because I know that's I think that's been a question recently. How will it be in Miami, Florida? There's only a 5 to 10% chance of tropical storm force winds impacting Miami. If there happens to be any tropical storm force winds, they will be there at 2 a.m. on Tuesday, which is not too long from now, but the chance is extremely low for that even happening there.
I'm surprised we don't have hurricane watches for the west coast of Florida.
It's true,
Well,
actually.
We do?
Well,
No, we don't. But I find
Okay.
that I agree with you on that.
looking at the latest wind speed probabilities, there is only a 5 to 10% chance of hurricane force winds, and that is just offshore of the Florida west coast.
And you know, I say that because even though it might not have sustained hurricane force winds, we would probably be talking about hurricane force gusts that are certainly possible. And usually, whenever they're in order, a hurricane watch is put into place. So it kind of surprises me that we don't have those watches in place.
Let's see if we can take a couple questions here before we take our hourly short break. Do we think the Nino Enso will keep cooling or warm up?
I think I have some thoughts about that. When the MJO is gonna pass into the Eastern Pacific, of course we're gonna have westerly winds. So at the end of July, Enso region should, if you follow the logic with the westerly winds creating downwelling Kelvin waves, which are warming the sea surface temperatures. Enso should be warmer at the end of the month, but generally with the current pattern of an African standing waves setting up, so that's basically just rising air over Africa being a persistent pattern, it's very likely that later into fall, Enso will cool again, and also subsurface heat has been decreasing. So there's less potential for downwelling Kelvin waves to increase sea surface temperatures in Enso region. So I think it's pretty likely for Enso to stay neutral but cool again into fall.
Now, it should be noted that I don't think that's really necessarily the biggest thing that you should be looking at when you take a look at the climatological factors for this year, mainly because, at least to this point, it seems like that there's going to be a massive suppressive wave, suppressive phase, I should say, that's going to be setting up over the East Pacific. And if that continues, then basically the Atlantic's not going to care what the ENSO is doing. It's just going to spin up a ton of stuff.
Well, yeah, as I just mentioned, African standing wave is a pretty persistent pattern, and that is also correlating with high Atlantic activity.
Yeah. But yeah, we're looking at a situation very much like 2004, where the ENSO is seemingly close to neutral, but it's not something that's going, or maybe even a little bit warmer than neutral, but it's going to behave in such a way that it doesn't benefit activity in the East Pacific because of the way that the world's setting up right now. So I really wouldn't put too much stock in the ENSO value itself. I would pay close attention to the coastal waters out of the Gulf of Guinea, where you could look for an Atlantic Nino or Nina. I would pay close attention to those equatorial anomalies because those are going to be, I believe, at least more important to the activity in the Atlantic than what the East Pacific waters are saying.
We're going to take a break here. We're back in a couple of minutes with more information and analysis on Tropical Storm Elsa. The 5 p.m. advisory came out down to 50 miles per hour, but a storm surge warning is now in effect for western Florida. Stay tuned. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Welcome back to Force 13's live coverage of Tropical Storm Elsa, which is moving over the island of Cuba right now. We'll be passing very close to the city of Matanzas before moving out over towards the Florida Keys. There it is on radar right now from Key West. Quite distant, albeit, but it is now on the radar. A storm surge warning has just been issued for part of the western coast of Florida for Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. Tropical storm warning for Cienfuegos, Matanzas, Villa Clara, Mayabec, Havana, and Artemisa. The Florida Keys from Craig Key westward to the Dry Tortugas, and the west coast of Florida from Flamingo northward to Ochlockonee River. Storm surge watch also in effect for west of the Oceania River to the Ochlockonee River, and a tropical storm watch for west of the Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass. So things getting a little bit more urgent in the messaging there, with the storm surge warning now in effect for a significant chunk of the western coast. Just to reiterate the actual numbers of the threat, the storm surge, the National Hurricane Center with their latest update now suggesting the southern coast of Cuba, if there's any remaining surge, to be between 2 to 4 feet. Englewood, Florida to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay, 3 to 5 feet. Bonita Beach to Englewood, including Charlotte Harbor, 2 to 4 feet. Oceania River to Ochlockonee River, 2 to 4 feet. Flamingo to Bonita Beach, 1 to 3 feet. Ocean Reef to the Dry Tortugas, including Florida Bay, 1 to 2 feet. And the Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass, 1 to 2 feet. Plenty of rainfall threats as well. We could be seeing maximums of 8 inches along the western part of the Florida Peninsula. This is the latest forecast cone, which is now showing that the storm may not last as a tropical cyclone off the US East Coast after emerging off the Carolinas. That's the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center, taking it to a depression as it enters South and North Carolina. My name is Nathan Foy. Joining me again tonight is the team consisting this hour of Christian, Devon, Kenneth, Noah, Wyatt, Xavier, and Mike. Good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
And as we look at the visible satellite imagery on the right-hand side of the image, down to 50 miles per hour and 1008 from the National Hurricane Center, was it the right call?
It's hard to say what the right call is and isn't without recon.
So we were discussing recon. Did we figure out, was it 3 hours from now?
Yeah, it takes off at 21Z, and it
Which is now.
yeah, I don't
Which
see
it hasn't taken off yet. So
it could have, but it takes a few minutes for it to pop up usually, and then it should get to the storm by 23Z, and it'll be there until 5:30Z.
And just to mention again for those who may be a little bit obviously we're referring to Zulu time, which is universal time, and that's the time that we've got displayed on the bottom of our screen here. That is 4 hours ahead of Eastern Daylight Time. So just to give you a reference point there.
I think, when was the last recon? That should have been about 5 or 6 hours ago.
Yeah, the last pass is at 14Z.
Okay.
it is it is fair to assume that land interaction did weaken the storm a little bit, so that's probably why they went down in wind
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah, I actually didn't understand why they went with 60 miles per hour. There hasn't been a single flight level wind reading of 50 knots or higher.
Mm,
I'm looking
uh,
at surface observations.
A very main point is that Recon never sampled the northeastern quadrant, which is supposed to be the very strongest due to motion factor anchoring. Radar indicated convection pattern.
Right?
And
Okay.
as of now, some surface observation in Varadero, Cuba, there's an airport recording pressure as of 18 minutes ago. It recorded 1012 millibars QNH pressure, which is still decreasing. It is pretty much still also expected that um, Elsa will leave Cuba pretty close to that airport, so that airport can pretty much effectively reflects the central pressure of it pretty accurately. But that probably will occur like after a few hours.
Of
Okay.
course, we'll be able to take questions as we go along tonight. That's really what makes us even more potentially more useful. Obviously, taking your questions directly. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. It will light up for us in the chat section if you're watching our YouTube stream right now. And that's what we were doing in the second half hour just a few moments ago. So we can field those questions as they come in. In the meantime, I don't know what we want to discuss next. Do we want to talk about the dynamics of the forecast and how that might transpire and the all the possibilities?
Somebody was asking earlier in the chat that Elsa will have a decent amount of time over water, but why will it only intensify? What is it, like 10 knots?
Yeah. So
Yeah, that
basically, we have cool sea surface temperatures. For one, anomalously cool sea surface temperatures in that area of the Gulf of Mexico. For two, that area of the Gulf of Mexico actually does have also relatively shallow waters. So the actual pool to get warm water out of isn't necessarily as strong as it would be if it was another 50 miles west, in which case, yeah, I could have absolutely do some things. And the third one is that this year is expected to be, I would say, mildly prohibitive. It doesn't look like it's going to be a huge prohibition, but year will at least be mildly prohibitive from rapid consolidation of the storm. We're not expecting it to blow up to be like Cat 1, well, I shouldn't say Cat 1, but it's not going to go up to like Cat 2 plus. That seems to be pretty much out of the question at this point. If it does come ashore as a hurricane, it'll probably only be a minimal hurricane. Ship's guidance suggests a peak of about 70 miles an hour. And usually that tends to be a little bit on the high end. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect a landfall higher than 65 knots or 75 miles an hour, which would be minimum hurricane. Either which way, if you're anywhere along the Florida coast, even though the hurricane watches aren't out, I would still make sure that I'm prepared for minimal hurricane force conditions. If you're within the storm surge warnings and local authorities are telling you that your house is potentially going to be underwater, make sure you take all the appropriate precautions. Evacuate only if you are told. Please don't evacuate if you are not told to evacuate because that causes problems. We only have limited amount of space on the highway, so if you're not in danger from this storm, I would not suggest leaving. So, like, eastern coast of Florida, which shouldn't get much more than beach erosion and minor rip currents. Shouldn't be much. And basically anything to the west of Panama City, again, though the impacts are going to be relatively minor. You're talking beach erosion, rip currents, potentially some rain, not much more than that. So I would still prepare for minimum hurricane force conditions, even if they're not sustained. It is possible to have hurricane force gusts within this storm as it comes ashore. And this thing should be moving along quite quickly, so hopefully that continues.
We have some questions here. Is there a chance that Elsa becomes a tropical depression when it's done exiting Cuba?
I would say no, because it's maintained its convection extremely well, and I don't see any reason why it would weaken much further than it is now. Usually storms
Yep.
don't weaken that much over Cuba.
Nope, I'm not seeing it either. What preparations or safety measures should be taken in Miami, Devon?
I would say not many. Any preparatory measures that should have been taken for Miami honestly should have been done yesterday, because you're pretty much going to have your closest approach with the system coming tonight. Tropical storm force winds are probable. I don't think they're likely. I think something like 10-15% for Miami Metro. If your home is susceptible to nuisance flooding, that is likely to happen with this storm. I imagine that the storm tides are going to peak above usual. So if your home is susceptible to nuisance flooding, I would expect that. So take any precautions in regards to that, whether if it's going to be sandbags or whatever other flood deterrent you decide to use. Sandbags usually the most popular.
Yep, and also, Mike, you're with us. We've not actually been able to hear from you so far on tonight's stream. I just wanted to give the opportunity to say a few words if you want to here.
Oh, okay. So, what I currently think about the system is that, yes, of course, it's undergoing land interaction. It's over Cuba at the moment. And then there's still a bit of uncertainty about the Gulf of Mexico peak. Like, it could be even up to hurricane strength if conditions currently allow for it, which is still in the air right now. But I wouldn't underestimate the storm still and would still take precautions as necessary.
Yeah, and actually, a little bit later in the hour, I think we'll take a good look at the models properly. I'll be able to show the GFS on mine, but I wonder if our team could help us take a look at some of the other models when the time comes in a few moments. Some more questions. On the opposite side, could Elsa stay 50 miles per hour until exiting Cuba? That's most likely, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is most likely scenario.
I would say so too.
I would also like to say, with the latest numbers coming from National Hurricane Center, taking a look at their forecast advisory and whatnot, it looks like the Florida impacts are currently rated as a stage 2 on the CDPS. Potential Florida impacts be a stage 2. So we're talking about a storm, and it's pretty much right in the middle of the stage. So we're talking about a 25th percentile storm at best, which means 75% of the storms that made landfall in the Atlantic between 1988 and now have been more destructive. So it does seem like that this storm's not going to leave a massive impact in Florida, but that does mean that you shouldn't be prepared for inland flooding, coastal flooding, and, as I said, hurricane force gusts to your property.
Yep, and that storm surge warning, as you just saw ticking along on the screen there. Should I prepare in Orlando? Is a question from Dirt Monster.
prepare for what? I think is a better question. Obviously, we won't have to deal with coastal flooding there.
It's
I
going to be
don't
rain,
know.
isn't it, really?
Yeah, I don't think that the wind impacts are going to be too significant. I assume probably 30-40% chance of tropical storm force winds.
Actually,
Um,
it's only a 10 to 20% for Orlando.
It's only a 10 to
And
20% for Orlando. I
yeah,
thought
and
Orlando was pretty far north.
you should be
So-
prepared by tomorrow at 2 p.m. for the arrival time of winds.
Yep. And we're talking about a rainfall estimate. It seems like localized rainfall in Florida could reach up to 8 inches. That should be north of Orlando. So, I would expect relatively minor impacts from this storm in Orlando, but definitely be prepared for some gusty winds, heavy rainfall. If you live in a low-lying or a poor drainage area, flooding is definitely possible. Just keep an eye on this. If your house has been significantly impacted by significant tropical storms before, say, Faye of 2008 kind of comes to my mind. If your house was significantly impacted by that, then, I would say take roughly the same amount of precautions that you would have with that storm with this one, even though it's not going to dump anywhere near the rainfall that Faye did.
Is Elsa holding up well with its convection, considering it's over land? Your thoughts?
Actually, it's really not especially bad right now. As it make land before it make land for Cuba, there's one thing that frictional convergence is helping it
Yep.
generating convection, and right now it's still producing some convection, the big tightening. Right now as a it's still inland. Uh, some clouds of around -80 degrees, yeah, almost -80 degrees is bursting, firing. And as it turns nighttime, where the atmospheric conditions is even more unstable, because yeah, during oceanic nighttime, the stability of in the atmosphere decreases, which even better more convection firing. So it's definitely probable.
Okay, I think we're about to... Nope, we're still not quite ready with the model output just yet. But let's just reiterate some of the information from the National Hurricane Center. A reminder of the watches and warnings. Storm surge warning was issued not long ago at the update when it came out 20 minutes ago. The west coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. That's a storm surge warning for that entire area. A tropical storm warning for the Cuban provinces of Cienfuegos, Matanzas, Villa Clara, Mayabec, Havana, and Artemisa. The Florida Keys from Craig Key westward to the Dry Tortugas, and the west coast of Florida from Flamingo northward to Ochlockonee River. A storm surge watch also in effect for west of the Oceania River to the Ochlockonee River, and a tropical storm watch from west of the Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass, Florida. I'll read out some of the rainfall information here. We covered surge a little while ago. We'll cover it again in future, no doubt. I'm not sure what happened to our screen just then. There it is, the visible. The rainfall amounts across the Keys, well, actually, portions of Cuba tonight still. Rainfall of 5 to 10 inches with isolated maximums of 15 expected. Significant flash flooding and mudslides. Across the Cayman Islands tonight as well, still rainfall of 3 to 5 inches expected. Scattered flash flooding. Across the Keys into southwest and western portions of the Florida Peninsula, 3 to 5 inches with localized maximums of 8 through Wednesday, which may result in considerable flash and urban flooding along with minor to isolated moderate river flooding. I said that quite incorrectly there. Across the rest of Florida into southeast Georgia and the low country of South Carolina, 2 to 4 inches with localized maximums of 6 through Wednesday night, which may result in isolated flash, urban and minor river flooding. Across central portions of North Carolina into southeastern Virginia, 1 to 3 inches with isolated totals up to 5. That's Wednesday night through Thursday night, which could lead to isolated flash and urban flooding. And for tornadoes, a few tornadoes are possible across South Florida tonight and across the Florida Peninsula on Tuesday. And of course, we've got increasing swells in the Florida Keys and South Florida tonight, which will spread northward along the west coast of Florida tonight through Tuesday night. The next NHC update will be at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll probably just pick that up. Will we? No, we're not there for that. We'll be off the air before then. But we will have our automated stream, which has been running 24/7 for most of the storm's duration so far. Anything else from our team just now? Any news?
I think you've covered the latest on what we've got so far for the National Hurricane Center.
I'm hearing that there was a 49-mile-per-hour wind gust reported in Boca Raton in one of the outer bands.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then I also looked at surface observations. There also appears to be a 38-mile-per-hour wind gust just north of Sarasota, Florida. And that is also associated with an outer band.
All right. Anyone who can screen share on our team, I would say get the models ready, because I'm now showing the GFS on my visualization here, just to show you what we're expecting from this storm, and we'll take a little look around the world whilst we've got the time. So this was the initialization from the GFS model at 12Z. We're still on. The 18Z run will be out in about an hour. So there you can see the green areas. That's tropical storm force winds, quite a large area there along the Florida Keys, and then moving up through the Florida Peninsula. Let's zoom right in there to see which areas are being affected by those tropical storm force winds, and you can see the cutoff point there. This of course is just a model. It could extend further, or it may not be as far as what the model is depicting. So this is its closest pass, pretty much with Sarasota there. Quite a large area of tropical storm force winds, although generally fairly weak when you look inland. 40s, 50s along here, and then only the area immediately on the coast is pushing 60 miles per hour there, at least on that forecast. And then the storm at that point still 60 miles per hour when it's at the same latitude nearly as Orlando. And then landfall, it weakens dramatically there, 46 miles per hour it's indicating at the landfall. And then it really withers away, still has some tropical storm force winds, and then it expands again as it transitions there to becoming post-tropical. There is a very large wind field as it moves along there to Atlantic Canada and beyond, and off it goes. Want to point out something that's been up on the models a little bit. The slight possibility of something that forms out of hardly anything along the coast of Central America. In fact, it's very hard to distinguish it on the latest model run. I think it's that there. So I'm not sure about that. It was more clearer in the earlier model runs, but that's just something to watch out for. That's on day 6 or 7, and then moving through Central America. Looking elsewhere towards the Eastern Pacific, very quiet. In the Western Pacific, we do have a tropical cyclone active, Tropical Depression 7W, and it's quite difficult to see even on the model here. There it is, very close to Taiwan and the Philippine Batanes Islands, where Signal 1 warning is in effect, and that will be gone very soon. Another weak signature there could be a tropical cyclone. In fact, I think our team did designate it. Did you?
Yes, we have upgraded 97W into tropical depression, with winds of 30 miles per hour and pressure of 1,000 millibars as tropical depression, and 7W we have it as a tropical storm, 35 knots, which means 40 miles per hour and pressure of 1,000 millibars as well. On 7W is speeding towards west-northwest and towards eastern Guangdong. And for 97W is expected to intensify slightly because the shear is quite high, and it will jump northwestward. Now it's moving west slowly, and it will approach the Hainan province in China, and then it will move further west and strike northern Vietnam. Now, white
Very
typhoon
brief
warnings
tropical storm there.
white typhoon warnings in effect in Hainan province and eastern Guangdong. Standby signal number 1 in effect in Hong Kong.
Yep, a brief tropical storm by the model there. Thank you for the update. South Indian Ocean, very quiet. Looking towards the Pacific, no doubt, very quiet. It's off season there. And in the South Atlantic, we had a system last week or a few days ago, which was interesting. I can tell you, hopefully, there will be nothing else there in the next week, which brings us nicely back to the North Atlantic, which is where the action is, of course, which is what we've been covering this evening and what we'll continue to cover, of course, right up until it's probably maybe multiple more landfalls. Let's go over to Wyatt. You've got some more models there for Elsa.
Yes, I do. I'm gonna pull up the H-Wharf model to start with here. This is the 12Z run. The 18Z run will be out probably within the next few hours. I'm going to look at the 10-meter winds. Right now, it actually shows it being 1,008 millibars, which I believe is what the NHC had.
Yes, it is.
It only showed tropical storm force winds in a very small portion in this little band right here of Cuba. Nothing really onshore right now. Once it moves over Cuba, it does actually weaken just a little bit to 1,010 millibars. But the winds begin to strengthen a little bit just above tropical storm force as it approaches land. And then something I do want to point out, the center is actually a little bit decoupled still once it gets up to here.
Very messy there.
Yeah, the surface center is shown here with the red L. And then if you look at the wind barbs, you could see a little bit of an elongation right there, and that probably will be easier to see here in the 850 millibar winds. Yeah, you can see surface center there.
What a mess.
Mid-level center down here. So H-Wharf does show that southwesterly shear impacting the storm. It continues to go up and makes landfall, and the Big Bend is a tropical storm with about winds of 40 to 45 knots, actually.
Yeah.
And then it starts to decay over land, while still bringing some tropical storm winds to the coast.
No, it's still got those winds.
It's tropical. Yeah, but it begins its extratropical transition, it appears, by this point.
Yeah.
I also want to look at the HMON model quickly. This one analyzed it to be much stronger at 12Z. Actually, no, that's about 55 knots, which I'm pretty sure the NHC still had it 55 knots at 12Z when it was down.
I honestly can't remember at this point, but it wasn't that long ago, yeah.
Yeah, and then right now it has it 1,004 millibars, which is a bit too deep. But it doesn't show any tropical storm force winds. It looks like that it starts to emerge off the coast of Cuba. Actually, something the HMON model has the position here at this time, while the NHC, they found the position to be somewhere in here. So it is a little bit to the east. It shows it strengthening a little bit overnight tonight, then kind of just fluctuating a bit in intensity before really just looking to be a weak system, probably a rainmaker. And then just landfalling as a weak tropical storm, or maybe even a tropical depression. I also want to show some of these model plots. I'm going to try and zoom into it just a little bit so we can see it better. The models are...
That is really tight consensus, though.
Yeah, they are tightly consensus. Now, earlier, like a day or two ago, we were expecting a landfall maybe somewhere in here. But the models were, if you remember, really fanned out. But now they have pretty much come to agreement that it's going to be somewhere in the Big Bend region of Florida. The intensity guidance here, it also shows it being 50 knots. At this point, it's actually 45 knots now. If you look in about 24 hours, it showed it intensifying 55 to 60 knots when it was 50 knots. So that might be more like 50 to 55 knots at this point. Then once it gets over land, it weakens to a weak tropical storm or a tropical depression before beginning to strengthen slightly. And then if we look at the GF ensembles, it also shows it being pretty tightly clustered somewhere in the Big Bend of Florida region. And it showed, a few of them show it getting down to the 990s. However, most of them keep it in the 1000 millibar range, which I think is pretty reasonable. GEPS ensembles are also not as tightly clustered, it seems.
What on earth is that outlier there?
Yeah, there's... I think that could be due to baroclitic forcing.
Yes.
But yeah, it shows not as tight because although this did run at 12Z, and there's not going to be another one until 0Z. And that's all I have for the model guidance right now.
So the way it's trending, it looks like we'll be a lot clearer on everything when we get to the next model arrays at 0Z, and by the time we wake up tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I think it'll be like pretty much a solid line tomorrow morning on the spaghetti plots.
All right, thank you for that, Wyatt. We're going to take a short break here. We'll be back in a moment to take your questions on our second hour of July 5th coverage on Tropical Storm Elsa. Over the years, we've done updates and live coverage on literally hundreds of tropical cyclones, and in recent years, particularly in 2020, launching out in other regional channels, doing weather updates and coverages there as well. We also launched our Earthquakes channel in 2020 and are going forward on all fronts in 2021 with a community that's grown remarkably in the last year. But it's not just about you being along for the ride, we want you to enjoy yourself as well as an Ultimate fan, and that's why we've lined up a big chain of benefits for each various stages on our Ultimate Fan program. Welcome back to Force 13 Live. We're looking at Tropical Storm Elsa, which is moving over Cuba right now with 50 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 1008 millibars. National Hurricane Center issued their latest advisory at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's just 35 minutes ago, of course. Their headline was that Elsa moving over western Cuba with heavy rains expected to pass near the lower Florida Keys on Tuesday. 50 miles per hour, pressure of 1008, moving northwest at 14 miles per hour. The big information that came at that hour's update was the storm surge warning, which was put into effect for the first time during this storm, which is now in effect for the west coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. We'll have more discussion on this storm through until I'm trying to figure out what time it would be locally. 7 p.m. Eastern Time is when we're finishing up here tonight, but we'll be able to take your questions all the way up until then with the latest satellite and radar views as it's now creeping into the radar range. There it is on the radar imagery, and you can see how some of the precursor bands are influencing the weather there in South Florida, with some significant thunderstorms already over land. Who would like to begin this segment? Xavier?
Yeah, sure. We're basically looking at a storm that's now coming off of Cuba. Of course, this has been a very confusing storm to track for many, given the fact that we, of course, had a lot of interesting notables in terms of the formation of this system. I could go over the notables since there's quite a few of them. But as of right now, just to get like the most recent notable with this system, sorry about that. When Elsa did make landfall, it became the first tropical storm to make landfall in the month of July, uh, in Cuba specifically, since Dennis of 2005.
Oh joy.
So that is a little bit of a interesting novel in a year we definitely do not want to be talking about, given the fact that it's 2005. We've also now generated 9 ACE. ACE is a measure which is called accumulated cyclone energy. It's a measure of storm's intensity over time. And I should be noting that this is the 4th most ACE violenic hurricane season through July 5th in the past 60 years. And the only years with more ACE in the past 60 years through July 5th are 1966, 1968, and 2012.
Wow.
So there is not many years that are beating it at this time. Of course, 2005 will later take on because of Dennis, of course. But the last storm to make landfall in July in the Florida Keys, which it doesn't look like it'll be doing, was Bonnie. And then, of course, if this does last...
Which Bonnie?
2010.
Right.
Um,
Terrible
and then-
storm.
And then, of course, if this does last 2 or 3 more days, this would be the longest lasting storm in July since Bertha of 2008. And then, of course, earlier records from when it was a hurricane. It was the first hurricane. It was the first hurricane to be in the Eastern Caribbean since really June and July. In a while, we've only had a very few years that had hurricanes in the Eastern Caribbean in June and July. 1926, 33, 61, 96, 2005, for example. And then, of course, you had Tropical Storm Gonzalo that was in the Eastern main development region. So, and then, of course, Isaias briefly crossed into the Caribbean as well. So, very interesting to say at the least there. It was the farthest east that a hurricane had formed this early in the calendar year since 1933, which has been coming up a lot of times so far this year. Then, of course, the fact that, to give an idea of how much we are just breaking past the list so far, the average first hurricane, this is with the new 1991 to 2020 averages, since, of course, we are now in the new decade, that is August 14th. So the fact that we did get it on July 2nd was definitely interesting to say at the least. And then, of course, the only tropical storm to form more east in the tropics of where Elsa formed was, of course, Hurricane 2 of 1933. So we have broken a lot of notabilities, and of course, this was the record earliest fifth storm, beating only Edward of last year. So a really interesting storm we've had so far. Very interesting location where it did form at the very bare minimum. So we really cannot say that Elsa was just an average storm. This is far from it.
Well, it's been a very curious storm that's going to require a lot of post-analysis. When you consider the quandaries that the analyst team have found themselves in for a majority of this storm at one point, when you consider the very high pressures that the storm has had.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of reminds me of the wind pressure relationship that Danny had. We know that when Danny formed, it had a really high pressure. I think it was like 45, 1013 at one point before they did, or something around there. It was, I know it was 1013 as a tropical storm at one point. And it's kind of reminding me of Danny's wind pressure relationship when you look at Elsa, because from the fact that, I mean, we've had it in the upper 1000s as a 60-mile-an-hour storm before in the past, so definitely very high pressure for what you would normally expect for an upper end tropical storm.
Yeah,
Tropical storm.
that's because when Danny formed, the environmental pressure is especially high. But when you look at the pressure gradients, that means the overall the environmental pressure minus the central pressure, the relationship of the winds and the delta P isn't that whack for Danny, but for Elsa, because of this crazy movement with over 50 kilometers per hour movement, at some time, the wind pressure relationship at that time is really broken. Like with only 10 something ish pressure gradient, but already reached hurricane status. Yeah, and then when it just slowed down, its own pressure gradient just blown out itself, and its winds just the recon um already struggled to find very high flight level. Actually, um not much hurricane force flight level as it decelerates, and yeah, not even a close 700 millibars at southwestern quadrant because it's moving too fast. Yeah, that's what I remember when I doing decision making in the analyst team.
Let's take a look back at the. Nope. Okay. That is supposed to be the rapid scan, which I would very much like to see, so that we can just check out the very latest imagery. I think we have it now. There it is. And I still like to remind people just how recent the imagery is these days. You know, it used to be 20 years ago maybe that the latest imagery would have been maybe an hour, 2 hours old. The latest imagery on mesoscale tends to be about 1 or 2 minutes. Just trying to figure out what it is on this right now. The last image there is from... nope, it's not going to tell me. From 43 minutes past, so that's just a minute ago. Not even that. That was about 40 seconds ago, the latest image on this, so it's right up to date, and still some convection blowing up near the very center of the storm, maybe a little bit east of it actually. Can we pinpoint a center of where is the storm's center right now, and how far over Cuba is it? How far is it? Closer to the northern coastline now, or is it still near the south?
Let me see. Because theoretically we can use radar to pinpoint its center currently, but as the elevation or say the distance is really far, so
Yep.
if from radar the mid-level center indicates that it is east of the bay in Cuba, which is around the middle of it. But as we mentioned before, the vortex tilting suggests that the LCC is actually northwest of it still, which actually it has already crossed the bay and more closer to the north, and I'll expect. Let me see. It probably will be out of Cuba around 3 hours later. 2 to 3 hours later. That it will leave the Cuba and head towards Florida.
What are our thoughts on the new hot towers firing and the blow up of convection? I briefly noted that a few moments ago.
That's also because of the because this is inland. Usually when the storm makes landfall, we from my experience, for most of the cases we see a convection blast.
That convection's blowing away from the center though. That's not lasting very long right now.
Yeah, that's also mostly the case, but as it gets off the coast, there should be another convection blowing up, as it tends away from the diurnal minimum oceanically.
Is that where it is now?
The convection is pretty away. Yeah, still very away. The whole craft band is pretty away from the center. More reflecting the MLC, but not the LC.
Yeah, of course. Let's take a look back at the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone and just decipher that a little bit more here. So you can see there that it's going to be Wednesday that the Florida landfall occurs. They expect it to remain a tropical storm barely as it enters into Georgia there on Wednesday afternoon. And then by Thursday it will be moving through the Carolinas, looking like it's going to remain inland. Only a little bit of the cone there is out to sea. And then it will turn post-tropical as it jumps up there the mid-Atlantic coast. Just a reminder, just read out the forecast points actually. So the first S there, that's 12 hours from now, and by that point they forecast it to rise back up to 60 miles per hour from 50 where it is right now. By the second point there, that's 65 miles per hour, and so is the third point, so that's what they're expecting for landfall, 65 miles per hour roughly. And then down to 40 miles per hour when it's inland, and down to 35, and then as an extratropical cyclone, back up to 45 miles per hour. By which point, as we saw in the models earlier on, the wind field will be displaced very much to the east, a large tropical storm wind field on the eastern side of the storm when it's out over the mid-Atlantic and northeast. And of course, Kenneth, I'm right in saying that it's always going to be eastward biased, the wind field now?
Yes, always has been. There are two reasons. At the beginning of the time, Elsa moving crazily fast, and which the motion factor would offset the winds in the southern quadrant, which makes the gale radius lopsided to the northeast. Well, pretty much as it moves northwest, for every westward northwestward storm, the wind field always lopsided northeastward. If it is not monsoonal in nature, which it will lopsided to the southwestward instead, despite movement, because that's where the cloud tops in. But Elsa is not. It's a tropical wave from the main developed region, which also very rare, actually, in June, early July, and it's always lopsided to the eastward, and as it moves northward, and yeah, the western core will still be suppressed by this motion, and and also due to the wind shear, westerly wind shear right now, and it's expected to continue as it approaches Florida away from Cuba. Uh, Also, from an indicated from the vortex right now, it's still the convection is still lopsided to the east, which always has been the case. Pretty much, not only Elsa, most of the storm that moves westward, northwestward, have their wind field lopsided to the east, with Elsa as a pretty typical case, which is showing it more persistently and maybe more extremely.
You'll notice that the image is jumping at the end there. That's because they've just repositioned the mesoscale floater, so that last image now shows a decent chunk of Florida. And we'll be getting used to that view now over the next few minutes, and you'll just see the new frames creeping in. You can keep sending in your messages and questions and even observations if you're near the storm or around those bands that are currently delivering rainfall in southern and maybe even central Florida at this point. And anywhere else that's affected by the storm, the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, Hispaniola, Cuba, and the Lesser Antilles that were earlier affected by the storm. We'd love to hear from you as well, as long as it's safe to do so. Start your message with Force 13 all in text on our chat feature here on the YouTube stream. Once we finish up here at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, if you're watching on the live link, youtube.com/force13/live, it will revert back to our automated stream, which shows imagery just like this, along with loads of other stuff. And that's 24/7, so you'll be able to track the progress of the storm even when we're not chatting. And also on our Discord server, that's where most of our community are, discord.gg/force13. That's where getting on for around 2,500 members at this point, all chatting about the storms and its progress and where it's heading, and all of that. So if you fancy going over that way, you can of course join the server. A question here: how let's start that again. Sarasota and Tampa Bay, how will they be affected by storm surge? Apart from it being quite significant, it could be up towards 5 feet in that whole area. And Devon was talking about what storms he was, or was it Xavier referring to what storms we were comparing it to earlier regarding the storm surge impacts? But I can't remember what they said now. They're just away for a moment here.
Oh, I wasn't talking about storms similar. I was just talking about the notabilities. I don't
Yes.
really know of storms that would be towards Devon, who's currently muted at the moment.
Okay. But
well,
I believe we are expecting 3 to 5 feet though for that whole area, aren't we?
Yes, I did just get our 22Z cone finished. That is now in live output. That will be the forecast we will be running with at the top of the hour.
So that's the latest Force 13 cone, rather similar to the National Hurricane Centers as far as I can see. And Xavier, why... sorry, I thought something broke down just then. Why do we do our own forecast cones as well?
Do our own forecast, given the fact that sometimes we have an analysis, and then there's also some times where we think there is a little bit more potential, or there's like a little bit more models that need to be leaned towards. And usually we do these cones as another general idea of what we are to expect, given the fact that, of course, we are in our way our own independent, given the fact that we have our own official estimate. Our own estimates are not official in any way, of course. You should still be seeking official intensities and forecasts from your local National Weather Service office or any other areas that are in your region that you're expected to receive any kind of information, whether it's for evacuations or warnings or any of that stuff. We just give an idea of what other ideas you are to expect. I mean, we're pretty much in agreement with the National Hurricane Center at this point. This has been a confusing storm, but we give it as an idea that this is still there. I mean, we did predict this was going to become a Category 1 hurricane at our very first cone in. That did end up happening. The National Hurricane Center was a little bit more uncertain. So,
of course, these cones are also global as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. These affect for global, so it's not basically while you have a whole bunch of different agencies doing cones between the different RSMCs, we stick to one universal cone. Although, of course, we have our regional branches that are also there to help convert them to whatever wind speed. You have Force 13 Philippines that helps, does everything in kilometers per hour. We have the Force 13 AU in Oceania, which does everything in kilometers per hour, of course, as well. And then, of course, you've
and they have different categories down there too.
Yeah, you have different category system down there as well. And then that's the same case with the Philippines, since you got severe tropical storm, then typhoon, and then super typhoon. So we have a whole bunch of regional channels that are there to help with that as well.
An observation from TOCF there. Here near Tampa Bay, everything has been quiet still, but now it's getting very windy all of a sudden. I just want it. Would that be anything? I'm just seeing if there's any of those rain bands that might be in the area that might be causing
that. Looks like the outermost influence of Elsa has been starting to impact. It looks like the outermost goes all the way up to just south of
Oh, there
Tampa.
it is. Yep, that's probably what's causing it there. Look at that.
The impacts have definitely begun. Looks like the heaviest of rain looks to be just south of Palm Beach and near Pahokee right now. There's also another area near Miami Beach and Hialeah that are also seeing some pretty good rain rates at the moment.
Let's just pop down over there as well. Take a look at the Miami radar here. I think that was a okay, that's a whole lot different to what the other radar was just showing us. That's interesting. There was also... Where's the other one? Melbourne. Let's see what that radar is showing us right now. There you can see once again the storminess in the area. But for the most part, we're sticking with the Key West radar so that we can make out the storm itself. Don't know why the resolution's gone all poor there. Oh, it's all broken. Okay, that's not current. The storm is not up there. It's down. For some reason, the juxtaposition is completely broken on that. So that will get very confusing before long. The storm is not there, honest. There it is instead on the satellite imagery, currently located over Cuba. Which is probably, with that little error there, probably means it's a good time to have a break here. So we'll take a few minutes out. And we'll be back with more discussion and commentary, and of course more questions in our final hour of tonight's coverage on Tropical Storm Elsa. Stay tuned. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Welcome back to our coverage on Tropical Storm Elsa, tonight's 3-hour live stream, which will hopefully shed some light on what the storm's doing. It's been a confusing one for most of its life and is now moving over the island of Cuba. It will pass just east of Havana, very close to, what was that location again? Matanzas. When it reaches the northern coast, and then it will emerge off the coast and head towards the Florida Keys. It will probably pass just west of Key West and then towards the western coast of Florida. In fact, landfall is only expected further north now in the Bend region. Not sure exactly where along that area yet, but the landfall intensity will probably be at mid-tropical storm range. Currently at 50 miles per hour and an estimated pressure of 1008 millibars. The National Hurricane Center expect that that's the lowest it will go for this particular point, and then it will start to intensify again up to 65 miles per hour in the Gulf of Mexico, and then start weakening once again as it reaches Florida landfall. Then it will continue inland, and no point me just telling you whilst looking at the radar imagery. Let's take a look at the cone as well if you've not seen it yet. Dropping down to tropical depression status Thursday morning, entering South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe a bit of Virginia before moving out over the Atlantic. And then strengthening again, but as an extratropical cyclone by that point. It will complete its transition and then head towards Atlantic Canada with winds of around 45 miles per hour. That's the current forecast. Things could change, of course, but it might be relieving to know for some that there are no hurricane watches in effect, so they don't expect this thing to get near hurricane status. Of course, stranger things have happened, but it's very much against the odds. However, there is a storm surge warning in effect, and that was issued at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And that was for the west coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay included in that storm surge warning. A tropical storm warning for the Cuban provinces of Cienfuegos, Matanzas, Villa Clara, Mayabec, Havana, and Artemisa. The Florida Keys from Craig Key westward to Dry Tortugas, and the west coast of Florida from Flamingo northward to Ochlockonee River. That's all a tropical storm warning. That's the blue outlines. A storm surge watch in effect for west of the Oceania River to the Ochlockonee River, and a tropical storm watch for west of the Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass, Florida. That's the small yellow outline on the edge of the western part of the cone. To reiterate some of the impacts and hazards affecting land: storm surge, which will raise water levels above normal tides by as much as the following in areas of onshore winds within the hurricane watch and warning areas. The southern coast of Cuba still could be 2 to 4 feet. Englewood to Oceania River, Florida, including Tampa Bay, 3 to 5 feet on the expectations there. Bonita Beach to Englewood, Florida, including Charlotte Harbor, 2 to 4 feet. Oceania River to Ochlockonee River, 2 to 4 feet. Flamingo to Bonita Beach, Florida, 1 to 3 feet. Ocean Reef to Dry Tortugas, including Florida Bay, that's 1 to 2 feet. And Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass, also 1 to 2 feet. And for rainfall, once again for portions of Cuba tonight, still rainfall of 5 to 10 inches with isolated maximums of 15 expected. And still across the Cayman Islands tonight, rainfall of 3 to 5 inches expected, which could lead to scattered flash flooding. For Cuba, it could be significant flash flooding and mudslides. In the Florida Keys, into southwest and western portions of the Florida Peninsula, 3 to 5 inches with localized maximums up to 8, which may result in considerable flash and urban flooding, along with minor to isolated moderate river flooding. Across the rest of Florida into southeast Georgia and the low country of South Carolina, 2 to 4 inches with localized maximums of 6 through Wednesday night, which may result in isolated flash, urban and minor river flooding. Across central portions of North Carolina into southeastern Virginia, 1 to 3 inches with isolated totals up to 5 on Wednesday night through Thursday night, which could lead to isolated flash and urban flooding. A few tornadoes possible across South Florida tonight and across the Florida Peninsula on Tuesday. We're finishing our stream at 7 p.m. The next National Hurricane Center advisory will be an hour later at 8. So now that we've gone through all of the really important stuff there, time to introduce our team for this hour. My name's Nathan Foy here in the studio. I'm joined by Devon, Kenneth, and Mike for this hour. It's nice to have you all on board again to discuss this storm.
Hello, good morning from here.
Yep, Kenneth, over there in Hong Kong, you've been monitoring the storm very closely, of course, as our analyst team. And is there much else to say compared to what you were saying in the last hour?
Mm,
No.
There's a bit of change.
Oh, there is?
The radar showing the sensor is a bit elongated in radar.
Okay.
I guess because mostly the land small piece of land can make it a bit tightened because as I said before there's a vortex tilt and misaligned LLC and MLC maybe trying to fix it a bit as I see
Okay.
and convection blast it's been warming a bit up but it's having more area covered by convection invisible number has changed. The center is still a bit tilted, more at the northwestern tip, as you can plot it LCC.
Kenneth, I'm looking at the visible right now, and it looks to me
Yeah.
as though the center, the low-level center, is still very close to the edge of the convection. Am I right?
Yeah, still really at the edge. As I approach, around at 22.8 north and around 81.9 west. That's the latest center, excuse me, 22Z center fix for me. While the MLC currently suggested by radar is
Further
a bit
east.
more, yep, way further east, around 22.6 north, 81.5 west, which you can still see is somewhat still pretty tilted.
Very tilted, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty tilted still. It still needs so much effort to repair, to be honest. And not much progress, to be honest, still. Although you can see some progress, but not much. Although the appearance looks, yeah, a bit better. Somewhat better with the frictional convergence.
Yeah, it just feels to me that if you draw a circle around the low-level circulation, it's probably... Oops, wrong button. Somewhere around here, and then the mid-level circulation's all around that. It's all around here, and it's all a bit of a mess. Upside. That's my take on it, Kenneth, if you can see the screen. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Maybe I'll share my screen as well.
Because what we're looking for in a storm that's intensifying is some... I forgot the word now.
Tis. For me,
Let's take a
my
look.
marker for LCC will just probe at here.
I've remembered the word.
Around
What we're
here.
looking for is symmetry, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty asymmetric. Pretty much, if you want to center fix something, you seldom look at the high clouds. It's better to use visible or shortwave IR if it's at night time. You look at the curves, the low level clouds for a better center fix. And yeah, also movement interpolation is very important as well. And yeah, that's the LCC I've probed here. But if you see the
So it's actually even further away than what I was marking
yeah,
out.
the MLC circulations is around like roughly here. Roughly here, you can see it pretty much misaligned.
And this is
Very
going to be the main
misaligned.
reason that the storm's not going to intensify rapidly.
Yes, because tilted vortex is very ineffective for central deepening. The pressure gradient will also be pretty much blown up. As it also due to deceleration. Pretty much if you look at the CKZ relationship, it's just that when you decelerate the wind speed with a pretty similar for whatever estimate value, it will just slow down the it would once it slow down, the wind speed also at a strongest portion will also decrease, which will make the pressure gradient blown up, and everything will just pretty much disintegrated, and you need a huge effort to reorganize it again, which it did some progress, but not.
Okay. A question here from Cooper. Is this thing stalling? Seems to be not moving or barely at all in the latest radar images. Has it at least slowed down, maybe?
Yeah. It really slowed down as it approaches inland, which it pretty much in most of the cases, if you are not like influenced by other things, pretty much in general, for near landfall inland storm, it really slowed down a bit. But was it really stalling? Don't really think so. It did move a bit. As I probe, it's still moving pretty steadily at 14 miles per hour.
Oh, okay.
Northwest or northwest for the LCC. The reason why you may see owl simply distorting radar it is because what you're looking in radar is not the LCC. Because in radar there's a somewhat tilting, which it is looking at something at the mid levels, which is showing what the MLC is, and it's somewhat the MLC has been stalling a bit in the past hours as it is in inland. Yeah, it has been stalling a bit, but for the LCC, it's still moving at a pretty steady rate.
A couple more questions here. If you do have anything that you'd like to share with us, either observations or questions or just anything about the storm, really, start your message with Force 13 all in text on our YouTube chat. Do you think that the outer bands of Elsa could bring rain or thunderstorms in the Great Lakes region?
Great Lakes.
Somehow I doubt that.
It's really far away, and if you say it is a Great Lake, as protocol is very unlikely because the first thing is it is pretty away from the cone, and it's expected to just go through the eastern coast, which is still very furthest in the Great Lakes region. This is the first reason. The second reason, as I mentioned before,
the Great Lakes aren't going to have any precipitation directly related to the storm.
As I mentioned before, the system is as always lopsided eastward due to sheer the vortex tilting, and the later on it was still lopsided to the northward and eastward, but it is due to the extratropical nature that mostly the cold front, warm front, the cloud front, it will mostly due to pyroclimatic forcing, it will mostly bend it eastward and northward, but not the westward. So also a note that this is west of the cone, so also a note that it would be affected anything due to Elsa. No, there's really a no.
Things look to be getting pretty serious over in the Tampa Bay area here. This big line of showers now, which continues to intensify. In fact, Tampa itself looks like it's going to get smacked by that. Quite significant reflectivity, very close to the radar site. Also, you saw on the satellite not long ago, just a few moments ago, a big burst of convection over Lake Okeechobee as well. And lo and behold, as we go down here, there's a lot of things going on there as well. Let's just try and... I think there was an issue with the Melbourne radar earlier. I'm going to try my fate with it again and see if we can get a... There we go, I think. Is it? Yes, that's the better radar. So that's what's happening there right now. Okeechobee getting whacked with significant showers as well. So That's where it's all going on right now, and that came up from South Florida. Nothing else on the way just yet by the looks of things, but interesting bands. You can see it on the satellite quite clearly. In fact, the highest cloud tops in association with the storm anywhere is the towers over Lake Okeechobee. Taylor asks, is there any update on hurricane season predictions? Last year we did a little update in early August. We might do that again this year, I'm not sure. What's our prediction for Elsa's final peak? High-end tropical storm or low-end hurricane? I assume you mean between now and Florida landfall. Looks like high-end TS. National Hurricane Center aren't expecting a hurricane. No hurricane watches or anything like that.
Yeah, the share is not gonna change too much. So 10 to 15 knots forward is rather favorable, but not gonna do any significant intensification. No, of only 5 to 10 miles per hour. Intensification can be expected, I'll say. Not really much a hurricane status. No, not really gonna re-intensify into hurricane status. But if you talk about the peak that's earlier near Barbados and Vincent, we're having a peak similar to NHC, 85 miles per hour, and pressure of 990 millibars, based on drop zones. Both estimates are based on drop zone. With the wind estimate from WL 150 and boundary layer 500 winds average and central pressure. Yeah.
Just looking at a few radar scopes here. This is storm total precipitation. Oh, my zoom thing's messed up now. I can't get off the zoom. There it is. So the storm total precipitation starting to go up in that area as well. Let's see if we can take a little gander as to what in the Tampa Bay region at least, and to the southeast there, how much it's been detecting so far. Nearly 3 inches already in a few areas between Arcadia and Sebring there, much towards the northwest where that rain is right now. 1 inch already in some areas, and that will be quite widespread, I imagine, when that storm has moved past. So interesting to look at there. Back to the reflectivity. There it is. Let's try and have a look at the higher resolution for the Tampa Bay area in particular, just to give you a big look at this right now, because this is probably the biggest. That's the velocity. Let's go to the reflectivity. There it is. So that's right now. Some serious showers there along I-75, getting very close to Tampa. Another question here. What? No, we had that one already. I've just seen all the links everywhere. Mike, is there anything you'd like to say at this point? Looking at the rainfall that's currently occurring across Florida right now, as expected?
About the rainfall, I would say that I'm not surprised that it seems to be raining over there, obviously, because there's a whole cyclone. But this rainfall, people should still be taking precaution because this rainfall could potentially bring flash flooding and do damage to other homes.
And I'm just curious to see how it will show up on the Key West radar, on the high res. That's how it's depicting the storm right now. There's a few little bits and pieces reaching the Keys at the moment. Not very much. That's how it's showing the storm in the higher quality. And this is the one that we've been showing for most of the evening, with the loop showing how you can definitely see the rotation in the thing. But as it happens on the satellite imagery right now, looking back once again at this mesoscale, massive convection burst over Lake Okeechobee and quite a bit over Tampa as well, actually. More so than what's in the core of the storm itself. Could this rain band in Tampa create an EF0 tornado or higher? Not seen anything along those lines to suggest at this point, but I haven't looked very closely. I'll take a look and see if there's any warnings out there right now. There's no severe thunderstorm warning or anything like that out there yet, so I'm not sure if indeed we'll see that, or a tornado warning from this. I don't think we will. What are expected impacts to central North Carolina? So we were looking at rainfall amounts, I think 2 to 3 inches generally we were looking at on the models earlier. Not widespread tropical storm force winds, or if so, it would be just at tropical storm intensity, 40 miles per hour roughly. And another comment there as well, saying that they've seen well over 5 inches of rain alone yesterday in Jacksonville. And there could be another 5 inches on the way as well. I'm not sure whether that would have been directly related to the storm. It may have been. I've not had a look at the wider satellite picture recently. So the latest on satellite depicts a storm that is asymmetrical, and that means that it's not going to rapidly intensify as some storms may do when it's presented with the opportunity that this storm may have in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico and all around the Florida Keys. Another comment there from Brian S. I don't know if you saw this, but the National Hurricane Center had a hurricane warning for Cuba earlier before Elsa made landfall, but had a 0 to 10% chance of hurricane force winds. They don't quite get that. I think it's mainly because of its history that it was a hurricane at one point, and that it's been a very anomalous storm in terms of the observations, how the pressure estimates have been very high for the wind speeds, and I suppose that they were playing it safe there. How long until the cyclone re-emerges over the Gulf of Mexico? So assuming that speed of 14 miles per hour increases, I've not got, I'm near the map at the moment, just trying to get the latest fix and a little bit of an estimate there on that. I would wager, Kenneth, that it would probably emerge in about 2 hours.
Yeah, around 2 hours. I'll say maybe a tad longer. Let me see. The current distance from it will left around 45 kilometers from its current movement before it will exit Cuba, which around 2 hours or a bit more, but it probably will out before around 8:30.
What do we think of the ECMWF's drunk prediction, in the words of our commenter TOCF, of 110 mile per hour peak in the Gulf? I've not seen that one. Did they do that? I can't comment because I haven't seen it, but I don't know if any of our team members have.
Oh, that one. That's not gonna happen. That's really not gonna happen. 99% likely. Because there's. Maybe let me see. Not really. Yeah, not really.
Nope.
No, the jet interaction is not that it's not that optimistic for rapid intensification. The westerly shear is still very apparent. Which it will persist all the way until the end of Elsa's lifespan. Which because the outflow isn't really that impressive in the western side, which pretty much for if you need rapid intensification due to jet interaction and at entrance region, you need a very excellent outflow. But in which that is not the case for Elsa, as not to mention it still need to repair from its heavily misaligned MLC and LLC and vortex tilting.
Yeah.
And also, various models like GFS and HWRF also depict that the same upper level anticyclone that aided it right when it was about southeast of Cuba is going to be the one that's backshearing it and basically restricting equatorial outflow. And it can also aid in helping, it can also aid dry air in infiltrating the system, which would all be very unfavorable for tropical cyclone development. And just based on that alone, even, I don't think that it would get to that high strength.
We're going to take a short break here. Keep your questions and comments coming in, and we're here for another half hour to analyze Tropical Storm Elsa as those tropical storm warnings continue, and the storm surge warning, most importantly, along the western coast of Florida. That's probably going to be the biggest risk for that particular area. We'll have more in a moment. Over the years, we've done updates and live coverage on literally hundreds of tropical cyclones, and in recent years, particularly in 2020, launching out in other regional channels, doing weather updates and coverages there as well. We also launched our Earthquakes channel in 2020 and are going forward on all fronts in 2021 with a community that's grown remarkably in the last year. But it's not just about you being along for the ride, we want you to enjoy yourself as well as an Ultimate fan, and that's why we've lined up a big chain of benefits for each various stages on our Ultimate Fan program. We're back with the latest on Tropical Storm Elsa for the next half hour. When we're finished tonight, we will, if you're on the live link on our YouTube stream, youtube.com/force13/live, it will transfer over to our automated stream, which shows imagery of the storm 24/7, day and night. You'll be able to take a look at Elsa. But for the time being, we'll be able to take more comments and questions as we have our warnings that are currently out there, with the storm surge warning in effect for Bonita Beach to the Oceania River, including Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, which is currently getting battered by thunderstorms associated with the storm's outer bands. If you've got any reports over that way, or indeed anywhere else within the storm's influence, we'd really want to hear from you, as long as it's safe to do so you can also send us a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we'll be able to take a look. James here says, since this storm usually has abnormally high pressure and the GFS's pressure is going down to 997, do you think that's a moderate to high-end Category 1? Interesting question. I don't think it's going to verify like that, though, Kenneth.
Yeah, not really quite. That will really happen. Yeah, I saw the initialization. The
Not convinced.
Yeah, not really convinced. The environmental pressure initialization is probably a bit too low.
Quite a few people have been speculating about the storm's movement right now, and one of those is Ryan Pence saying, do you think it's moving more north than northwest? Some people are suggesting it's been moving northeast. I can see how people think that because of the convection blow-up has been pushing sort of eastward a little bit. You can even see it on the visible, but you see it even more on the infrared. Do you want to explain that?
That convection that does not represent to the true center of Elsa. That's just the mid-level center. The true LLCC, the lower level center, is not at that convection. It's west of it, and it's currently still moving northwest or northwest, which now is still hasn't shown any eastward vector yet. No, zero, not yet. It will only really occur as a towards near Florida. Yeah. No.
All right, we're
That
hearing
one.
about some street flooding near Tampa right now. That's from Mark there. Another question: if the low-level center and the mid-level center are aligned, I should mention when we're hearing LLC and MLC quite a lot. That's low-level center and mid-level center. When they're aligned, it certainly looks that way. It's tightened up a bit. Is it more aligned?
No.
No, I don't
As
think
I
so.
see, no, it is still heavily misaligned. And yeah, land doesn't really actually help align the vortex, the MLC and LC. What it can only do is what that only really helped it is a decrease of shear, which is not really expected.
Andrew Palmino says that they're in South Florida and it's gusty and raining pretty hard from the storm bands. And in Seminole as well, an outer band there being reported by Casey. And quite windy in downtown Tampa, so it's all going on in quite a few of those places right now.
Yeah, in recent images, several convection has been bursted, probably due to pretty strong, heated landmass in the afternoon, and probably pretty decent convergence due to from the current of Elsa and more northerly air mass, and with a pretty high upper level winds southwesterly, which favors convection firing up and causing pretty
Yep, there it is right now,
intense
Tampa.
convection, and intense convection is very likely, pretty much in general, will bring pretty gusty winds. So yeah, stay safe.
Tampa right on the edge of that big burst right now. That will be moving over very shortly. In fact, the worst of it might pass just south now. St. Petersburg, looks like some significant weather there for you as well, particularly further west towards the coast. So that's the latest there from the local radar, and you can see from that radar towards Okeechobee still as well. Huge areas of red there. And I know people are still sending in their reports. Street flooding in Fort Lauderdale as well. And that if we just let's go back down to Miami, and hopefully the radar didn't work properly last time. It was a software glitch and not the no, at least I think it was. Oh, there we go. I think that's what it's actually is right now. Yep, so rain retreating from that area, moving northwards. The Melbourne radar's probably a better one to look at, maybe. At least for the Okeechobee rainfall there. Yep, clearing the Fort Lauderdale area up towards West Palm Beach and north of there now mainly as well. More questions. Is it unusual for the outer rain bands of a tropical storm to have colder and higher cloud tops than the storm's core? Not that unusual, especially when the core is over land, right?
Yeah, that's the first. Yeah, this is the first thing, and the second thing is the outer rain band can be, well, that depends on the environment at the outer rain band. If the convergence and surface heating is very intense, both are very intense, the convection at the very out rain band, like what it is now over Florida, that is totally possible. That the very outer rain band is even more intense than a convection. Not really uncommon actually.
Yeah, okay. And the NHC says a 0 to 10% chance of hurricane force winds. This is from Ali. Does this mean that there is I keep saying it, a 0 to 10% chance of a Category 1 hurricane, or is this just the chances of hurricane force gusts? If they're specifying hurricane force winds, they'll be talking about 1 minute sustained winds. The language is everything there. If they are saying winds, that's hurricane force winds, Category 1. If they specifically say gusts, then obviously that's gusts. 1 minute sustained winds is what defines the category. A comment there, getting very windy in downtown St. Petersburg due to storm bands. That's no surprise, taking a look at the radar just a few moments ago. More questions. Will Elsa impact Atlantic Canada properly as a post-tropical cyclone? It will deliver tropical storm force winds to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Possibly quite widespread, but that's still a little way off yet. That's about 4 to 5 days away. And we'll bring it back to the radar imagery once again of the Tampa Bay area to give you an idea of just exactly what's happening right now. Let's go to the very latest if we can. And hopefully it will come up with, there it is. That's as best as we can gather right now what's going on in the Tampa area. Pretty messy picture there right now. And more comments here as well. In Tarpon Springs, there are no storms visible yet, but it's getting quite windy. And that is west of Tampa. Let's reiterate some of the watches and warnings that are currently in effect out there for the whole region regarding Tropical Storm Elsa. Just to remind you, for the National Hurricane Center, their last update from 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And just in case the clock in the corner there throws you, UTC is 4 hours ahead of Eastern Daylight Time. So we are currently at 10:41 UTC, which is 6:41 Eastern. At 5 p.m., last update, it was 50 miles per hour and 1,008 millibars, the storm. A storm surge warning had just been issued for the west coast of Florida from Bonita Beach to the Osceola River, including Tampa Bay. And a tropical storm warning is in effect for the Cuban provinces of Cienfuegos, Matanzas, Villa Clara, Mayabec, Havana, and Artemisa. The Florida Keys as well under that tropical storm warning from Craig Key westward to the Dry Tortugas, and the west coast of Florida from Flamingo northward to Ochlockonee River. Storm surge watch for west of the Ocilla River to the Ochlockonee River, and a tropical storm watch for west of the Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass, Florida. There's a visual depiction of the watches and warnings right now. The blues are the warnings, tropical storm warnings, and the yellow is the tropical storm watch, that small bit of yellow there. And that is the forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center from 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Tropical storm landfall in the Bend region of Florida on probably Wednesday morning. Models are indicating that the storm will probably weaken quite a bit as it makes landfall or slightly before, and that it will have its secondary or tertiary or whatever number we're up to peak, its latest peak, on Tuesday evening into early Wednesday morning at around 65 miles per hour is the current expectation. And then it will weaken to a tropical depression over Georgia and through South Carolina and North Carolina and Virginia and possibly the Delmarva Peninsula out towards the US Northeast. And then turn post-tropical. That's why the storm icon there has a white background and black text. That indicates that it's post-tropical. Its wind field will expand, but it won't be very strong, 40 to 45 miles per hour as it moves through there, and won't deliver as much rain, of course, as it would if it was a tropical storm. To reiterate those storm surge values, expectations are as follows. Still for the southern coast of Cuba, 2 to 4 feet. Englewood, Florida to Ocilla River, including Tampa Bay, 3 to 5 feet. Bonita Beach to Englewood, including Charlotte Harbor, 2 to 4 feet. Ocilla River to Ochlockonee River, 2 to 4 feet as well. Flamingo to Bonita Beach, 1 to 3 feet. Ocean Reef to Dry Tortugas, including Florida Bay, that's 1 to 2 feet. And Ochlockonee River to Indian Pass as well, 1 to 2 feet of storm surge expected in that zone. Let's see if we can take some more questions right now. What do we have the storm peaking at in the Gulf? We saw our cone that Xavier produced a little while ago. Let's just take another look back at that and see if I can tell you by looking at it. So expecting there a 65 mile per hour peak on the cone. In fact, I think overall that is slightly, ever so slightly more conservative than the National Hurricane Center's forecast. More comments here about what's going on the ground. 2 lightning strikes near Tampa, apparently, from Florida weather forecaster, and a few people talking about street flooding. Is Orlando going to get it bad? We're talking about, I think, maybe absolute maximums of 5 inches in the Orlando area. Probably won't get that high. Back to the radar imagery. This is how it looks right now in the Tampa region. And let's go back to the animated imagery. This is what's been going on in the past hour or so. That line really blowing up there, pretty much over Tampa. Another question, can a Tampa Bay landfall still be possible? Yeah, it's always riding a fine line when it's along the coast of Florida. It's in the cone, so yes is the short answer, that it can happen. And there's probably a I'm trying to figure out what the chance of that would be, but it's not out of the question. It's in the cone, on the edge of it. And thunder in Jacksonville, Florida as well. Let's see what we can find up there. Just trying to get the radar. We'll keep on the National Hurricane Center for a minute and see what we've got up there in the Jacksonville area. Just patiently waiting for the radar to reload here. Alright, I think this is what we're seeing in the Jacksonville area, so that's interesting. I'm not sure if that's fully associated with the storm. I'm not sure it is because of the direction it's moving, but I assume it's coming from those little thunderstorms to the west. To the south you can see just the edges of some thunderstorms moving up, not far from Daytona Beach. That's most likely associated with the storm itself. Another question, how much longer until it exits Cuba? 3 to 4 hours suggesting. We're probably looking at a bit less than that. I'm thinking 2 hours. Kenneth, you still thinking about that?
Can you say it again? Sorry.
Regarding how long it will be until Elsa emerges over water again.
Emerges over water again. So 2 cases. Right now, emerging back to water or exiting Cuba around 2 hours, and if you say way after the mainland masses in the United States, over 3 days. It really needs 3 days, but it could be a bit faster if the jet stream picks up it faster.
And right now on the satellite imagery, it's looking to me like it's starting to pick up a little bit. All of a sudden it looks much closer to the northern coast. But we'll take more questions here. We've got 10 minutes to run, so make sure you get your questions in if you're hoping that we'll respond. We do sometimes miss questions because the chat sometimes goes really quickly. Is there a chance Elsa can blow up and go above 75 miles per hour? Xavier's back in the room. I wonder what you think.
Yes, I'm here for the last 10 minutes of this, but I really don't think that is going to be the case. Devin explained earlier while I was here before that ships was only going up to 70 miles an hour, and those usually pretty much take pretty much they're usually a little bit more towards the aggressive side. They usually predict what the best possible realistic scenario is usually, and really it's very unlikely it goes past 70 miles an hour. I know the European model in this 12Z run did take it down to 983 millibars, which would have made it become a hurricane. I'm not saying it's impossible or anything that it's not that it won't happen. It just seems extremely unlikely at this time.
All right, something I've actually not looked at yet. I just want to see if there's any. I won't be able to show this to the viewers, but the 18Z GFS, which has just come out, still in the process of doing the longer range. Just wondering what that's showing now with regards to latest models. It's initializing at 1003, would you believe?
So that's a bit too strong.
And then bringing it down to 997 in 24 hours. That's what someone was alluding to earlier. And then, so yeah, there's some strengthening that goes on when it's paralleling the coast of southwestern Florida. There could be a chance of hurricane briefly there. It reminds me of...
Yeah, we won't rule that out.
It might remind me a little bit of late Eta, perhaps.
Yeah, because Ada did go up north parallel the coast and did become a Category 1 for 6 hours, I think, before it did begin that curve towards northeast, which is kind of similar to what it's doing, except although, of course, with Ada, that went back took that turn and back into the Western Atlantic much sooner and much earlier. So it kind of, in the specific part of Ada's track, this is kind of what it reminds me of. So it's definitely not a bad comparison. But once this gets inland, then it will be a little bit of a different story.
And it is still hinting only a tiny bit at this point. The signal was much stronger 24 hours ago about that potential Central American system on day 7, 8. Doesn't look like it at this point. So that's some
Whatever.
good news.
Yeah, whatever keeps the Atlantic dead.
Let's keep the Atlantic dead. We didn't have any more questions that came in just then, so let's take a look back at the latest radar imagery. This is what's going on once again over Tampa. Very much getting some heavy weather there right now. That line connecting up a little bit again. St. Petersburg, looks like the center of St. Petersburg sort of missed it a little bit there, but certainly neighborhoods to the west and northwest will have experienced some significant showers. The Tampa area in general has had a lot of that. And also further east once again as well. Let's just see if we can get that, see if there's any update to the estimated rainfall accumulations here. You'll see the map start to light up with all that rain that's started to come through. As a matter of fact, it's looking like it's not been producing that much precipitation. Of course it has been, but not as much as some other areas have already received to the east. Let's see what the highest values are. Okay, no, there's a 2.5 inch reading there actually just on the coast north of Ruskin. So realistically that could well be 2.5 inches once we catch up for the whole region around Tampa and St. Petersburg. Anywhere in those areas might have received local maximums of 2.5. We'll wait and see. More comments. The track of this storm reminds me of a combo of early Laura and late Eta. Early Laura, I'm not sure on that. Well, I guess I can understand that. There's warnings of surge in South Florida, but the thing is that will the Bahamas be in the greater risk for storm surge? I think we can categorically say no on that one.
Yeah, this storm won't be affected. I mean, you don't even have any surge really or any kind of warning for the eastern coast of Florida. It's pretty much safe to say that there's really not going to be much in terms of impacts for the Bahamas. Maybe some of the clouds from some of the clouds from Elsa, which is already apparent right now, given the fact that the outflow does extend pretty far from this. It's just that you're not likely to see any kind of surge or tropical storm force winds at all.
Bryson asks, is it going to get stronger after landfall?
Well, land is a thing, so land is always something. Land is not something that helps storms unless, of course, you're Claudette, and that had a reason, while it was in North Carolina, of course. But this is not Claudette, and this is not taking the same track or having the same environmental factors as Claudette. Although, of course, strengthening is expected as it does interact with the jet stream after it enters back in the Western Atlantic. And that is shown in that cone there, where it is still a tropical depression as it is in North Carolina still. And then by the time it's off of New England, it's back up to a 45-mile-an-hour post-tropical system. So if it does do strengthening, it's just evident that it will likely be turning post-tropical. But as long as land is in its way, then once it does make landfall, it should be on a weakening course for the short term.
James asks, when do we think the next storm in the Atlantic will form? And a side question, what was the ugliest tropical storm or hurricane that was a tropical storm at the time that we've seen?
In terms of the next named storm, I'd probably have to say mid-July, maybe somewhere in the second half.
Give it a couple weeks.
I'll say a bit later, because logically, models aren't predicting any development.
I think we'll get something weak out there.
Into the Indian and Pacific, which doesn't really favor until like late July. I expect late July to early August. We'll see another, I believe, more active Atlantic.
And that other question about the ugliest tropical storm, we've been thinking about that. There have
Say
been
here.
some that I remember particularly, because it was early in my tracking days. Tropical Storm Danny in 2009 was appalling. And perhaps you could also say Patty in 2012.
Mm,
Another
in
question.
2011.
Sorry?
It's like I have to go with Hosea 2011 on my end.
There was also.
Just
Sorry, I'm hearing a bit of feedback. There was also Dawn in 2011 that literally, evaporated as it moved along the coast of Texas.
Indeed.
Is Tampa vulnerable to hurricanes? Too right it is.
All of it is really.
And this will be our last question for tonight, and thanks very much for sending them in, making it a much more interesting live stream, I'm sure. Are there currently any tropical waves over Africa that could develop over the Atlantic basin in the next 7 days?
Unlikely. There are a wave or two currently in the main developed region, but as of now, although there's been a bit less dry air, which typically is pretty dry in the main developed region in June, July, early July, but as of now, the wave simply isn't have too much chance to have a good westerly flow to develop further into storm. Yeah, no.
All right.
No. And the NGO is also not good for a main developed region development. No.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, and to the whole team tonight for the coverage for the last 3 hours. It's been great to have them on the air once again. We'll be heading over to the automated stream now. If you're watching on our live link, youtube.com/force13/live, it will show you imagery throughout the night, 24/7, whilst this storm is active. And we're not sure on our full schedule for tomorrow just yet. If in doubt, though, if you don't hear anything on our channels and on our social media, then it's probably safe to assume that we'll be going live at the same time again tomorrow. That would be 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And if there's any changes to that, it will probably be longer rather than shorter than the times that we've done tonight, of course, with the storm approaching Florida by that point. That's it from us. My name is Nathan Foy, and this was Force 13's latest coverage on Tropical Storm Elsa. We'll be back with more across our social media platforms and across our video updates on YouTube. But for now, from us here at the studio, good night.